Hello and welcome to the Atlanta Woodwright Studio. I'm gunmaker Chris Knerr, and this is the beginning of another series on making a gun stock. Finally getting around to putting metal into wood. After all the others, I imagine you're thinking it's about time. I'm going to be focused mostly on three different kinds of stock. I'm going to try to keep it basic and more traditional. That's going to be a bolt action, a two-piece stock, what you usually find on shotguns and lever actions. I think there's some semi-autos that also use them. And of course my favorite, the muzzleloader. Now, how to go about these? The work involved is very similar between the three, and it's only nuances. Of course, must be some kind of nuance if you're going to compare a two-piece shotgun with something like this muzzleloader. But seriously, it's not a lot of difference between them. I'm going to start off with a bolt action because I think that's what most people are going to try first. Now I'm going to start off with a bare stock. This piece of wood, and you can see there's not much straight on it, and we'll go from there. And the same thing with the muzzleloader. There's nothing particularly straight about it. And it probably hangs over the edges of the picture the camera can take, but we'll deal with all that as it comes along. Now you can order a semi-inletted. The drawbacks to that, of course, it has no center lines, and the inletting is not going to be that close. I'm going to start from scratch, so you'll have an idea if you ever want to try doing it. You can also pick up better pieces of wood. You can also make it so that it fits you, which is the whole idea behind this. And also, when you're done with your first one, try to hold your patience. There's a big, long learning curve. I mean, this is pretty new. Most people don't jump into carving quite this much. And try a second one. You'll find out the second one, compared to the first one, it's a piece of cake, and things just work out a whole lot better. Before I get too far along, I do need to bring something that's rather important to your attention. As of 2008, 2010, a lot of the regulations changed according to how the ATF sees a gunsmith. Now, I'm not an attorney, so of course I can't give you the same advice with the same weight. But when I read the rules and regulations, to me it seemed pretty clear. And the other friends I have that are gunsmiths also read it the same way. So you might take that as a strong hint. As long as you have this, you're okay. You can modify it, carve on it, whatever you want, refinish it, doesn't matter. It can be for you, it could be for your friends. You can charge a stranger for it. The ATF is not really going to care. This is just, it's wood. The problem comes when you do this. Now you're a gunsmith. With one small exception. If this metal is yours, you're okay. What it kind of boils down to, if you don't have an FFL, the person that owns this metal has to be in the same room as you are. The whole time that it's in your possession. If he leaves, he has to take the metal with him. That makes things awful complicated, and so I recommend getting one. Now, I imagine there's going to be some eyebrows raised with that comment. Getting an FFL really is not difficult. It involves a little bit of paperwork, a little bit of patience. It takes 6 weeks, maybe 3 months at the outside to get it. And the kind I get is a Type 7. It's actually for manufacturing, but it covers just about, excuse me, it covers mostly everything I can do with it. Now you can get add-ons for machine guns and silencers. That's up to you. That's a totally separate issue. For accepting somebody's firearm and having all the paperwork and bookwork, please look into getting your FFL in a Type 7. Now, what do you have to go through to get it? If you're more or less an upstanding citizen without too many speeding tickets, they do overlook some minors, kind of black marks, but there's the big ones that, well, yeah, you might have some problems. You call up the ATF, ask them for an FFL package, they'll send it to you, and in it are 3 or 4 little blue cards. That's going to be the hardest part because those are for your fingerprints. Now the states tend not to want to help you. You have to find a federal agent. The reason being, this is a federal license. It's all run by the federal government. They're not about to use their people, their time, wear and tear on their equipment to fingerprint you if it's not for them. Now, out of convenience, I would certainly be happy to compensate them for it, but for some reason that's not acceptable. So how do you find these federal agents? You just call around, find a gun store that sells the machine guns or silencers, because the folks that get those pretty much have to go through the same thing you are. Have to be licensed by a federal agent. Call them up. They'll give you the name, contact info, set up an appointment, and $35 later, you'll have your official fingerprints. Now with it comes a piece of paper. It's from the agent. This will describe who he is, what his qualifications are, all that kind of stuff. Really hang on to that, and that is the one that you have to include with your fingerprints when you return all that paperwork. They don't accept copies. Now I would make a copy for yourself for your own records. So you send all this stuff in, you wait patiently, and you'll get a call from one of the ATF agents to come out to your shop. Again, this is no really big deal. They're not out to get you. All they wanted to do is go through and make sure you understand all the paperwork. There's not much to it, but boy, they are very, you better have your T's crossed and I's dotted, the few that they do require. He'll go over it in detail with you. You're more than welcome to ask him questions. He'll ask you a few questions. There's nothing really, the first time around I was probably a bundle of nerves. It's rather anticlimactic. He'll hand you the paperwork probably with your number right then. If not, he'll give it to you so you can start your business, and that's what you pretty much are. That's the way they look at it, even if it's just a hobby. If he doesn't have the number with him, it'll show up in another week to 14 days after he pays you a visit. And now you're all clear, ready to go. And quite frankly, if you don't have it, well, who wants to mess with the federal government? Personally, I get enough hot water without asking for it. Okay, one of the things a friend of mine pointed out, not everybody's going to have all these expensive hand tools. That's a point. So watching me do it with tools that have just about every shape and size known to man really isn't fair. He'd like to see something more in line with what he would have. So what I did is kind of went to the flea market and yard sales. So I picked up some stuff, a couple of Stanley planes, and trued them. And you can see this one's still has a little dish in the middle. I don't think it'll hurt anything. The main part here in the front, and I have two sides that seem to cover everything. Now this is a little different, but just to show you, you can still get it to work. You can see very large patches where it's corroded the sides away. But once again, just put sanding paper on a chunk of iron. Actually, I used my tabletop to my saw because it's fairly flat, glued the sandpaper down and went to work on it. When you do that, of course, make sure you have all this stuff in there because that'll warp it. Just pull the blade clear, make sure you don't keep hitting it. Sharpen that up, that one's ready to go. And calipers, this is a pair of plastic, comes from Lowe's and Home Depot. The big box hardware stores sell them. It's actually should be able to do everything I need. We'll certainly find out. And of course, tape measure. And for a strike knife, I think this will work. I also need some pretty healthy sized gouges. These also came from the flea market. Now one of the things, this has no name to it, so there's no way I could tell what kind of quality the steel is. Well, you might get kind of fussed at, but if it's possible, take a knife and along the edge, try to cut it. If you can peel off a little curl, that means this is a lot harder than this is. You don't want it. This, when I did it, I got a little tiny skips. So that meant these two were about the same hardness. That meant this was good. So, got 3 different sizes. And we'll see what we can do with that. And you will need a spoke shave, especially when it comes to the outside. These are, I mean, worth their weight in gold. So this also is a really old Stanley, and I actually like it better than the Lee Nielsen. It has these nice big wings, so I can get behind it, and I actually have room for my fingers underneath. The Lee Nielsen, you can only grab it with your fingertips. Of course, this is a somewhat inexpensive set of chisels, and this was a birthday present. Hopefully I was a teenager. They might be even older than that. And the last find, I've been using these for about 1.5 years now. These are flex cut. Comes with a buffing, and the whole kit was $125 on eBay. Now I kind of laughed when they sent me this yellow with Band-Aids. I thought, well, that's a funny sense of humor. Well, it turns out to be a little bit more real than I thought. Most of these blades sit like this, and every time I would reach in to grab a new blade, you get stuck and you end up bleeding all over the place. So usually I start off with it on the outside like this, and I find out as I'm doing my work, I end up taking them and just throwing the blades into the box. I thought it would nick, but no, if you're just gentle about putting them back in the box, the edges seem to hold up pretty well. The one gripe I might have, yes, these are light. You'll have to remember it. You can't use a big mallet to pound on them. And 2, get yourself some more jeweler's rouge to load this up, because the little brick that comes with it, it's not going to last very long. You'll need some kind of a light mallet. And last of all, some kind of brush. Because a lot of the times when you've been really at it, if you use your hands to brush it out, you're going to end up with splinters. And of course, if I get splinters in this, it's not going to bother me. Okay, that's the basics. I guess we should start removing some wood. Time to make some sawdust. Now, one of the things, I'm doing these videos a little differently. Heather and Laura, I didn't think it was fair to film for 3 minutes, then ask those 2 ladies to sit for 20 minutes to an hour, twiddling their thumbs, film another 3 minutes, repeat. So I'm going to do this all by myself. So you're going to notice some jumps, stops, starts during the filming. Just bear with me. So we have 1 plank, and what we need to do is get some center lines. Now this is kind of high in the ends here. You can, if you have a joiner, and one thing you have to be very careful is that joiner is tuned. If not, what you end up doing is having almost a ramp that goes up to about here, that all of a sudden it'll kick up in the back. And that's something you don't want. So even if you do have a joiner, go ahead and use it, and then come back to a plane. And what I'm going to eventually use is a straight edge, and I'll show you how to use that straight edge and get the last little bit. We also want to make sure this is square to this side, and then we can start outlining what kind of stock we want to use. Okay, here's my piece of wood and plane I mentioned, and off we go. Now, one of the things you'll have to remember, I'm used to using a plane. I have just about all my life. I'm kind of a big fellow. My wrists are about 9 inches in diameter, or just a tad under, so I'm also built for this. The first couple of times you do it, you're going to find yourself getting exhausted. Just pace yourself, and don't try to take off too much at one time. Planes aren't made to take huge amounts, and some of these lighter weight ones, you'll just be doing yourself a disfavor. You'll wear yourself out and really won't get rid of that much wood. So, okay, now it's getting some pretty big bites out of it, so I want to back my plane off just a little. That was a little too much. And that chatter means it's getting dull, or I'm going in the wrong direction. And we continue on. This is called inletting fluid. I mentioned that in some of the other videos. You'll need that. This is to take place of smoking. You can use a candle, or some people even use an acetylene torch. Quite frankly, both of them tend to heat metal up so fast, I end up burning my fingers on it. So that kind of is a downside. And then with the acetylene, it pours out so much smoke because you, of course, have the oxygen turned off. Sets the place up. It's also kind of expensive, and you're going to use a lot of it. So what I was demonstrating, this is just a yardstick from an office supply, so I can check how flat I've gotten the top here. I set it on here originally to look at it, and well, I got kind of lucky with my plane, and it's fairly straight up to about the last inch and a half to 2 inches. This much doesn't matter. I'm not really concerned because this is all going to go away, and most of the receiver and all that's going to be about here. Now, let's say I kind of messed it up and I do have a slight valleys in here. How do you tell? Well, this is the inletting fluid I mentioned, and I use just a little bit of this naphtha, which is, in days of yours, used to be called lighter fluid. Just pour it straight into the bottle, and enough will dissolve in here to be useful, because you don't really want to put it on full strength. You'll have a build-up in a hurry. And yes, you are going to knock it over, so be prepared. And one of the downsides of this black stuff is a little tiny pinhead will coat you from head to toe. It almost goes against the laws of physics and Mother Nature, but it's amazing stuff. Just the way it spreads. Alright, so we put on the coat here. Take one edge, set it down there, and then just set it down. And what we're going to try to do is just slide it back and forth. And yes, you'll have to do this a couple of times to get all the way across. But as you can see, that's nice long black lines. There's a little bit lacking here, but I know it's less than the thickness of a piece of paper, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, the next thing. I don't know if this is square to my cheek or the side here. So rather than use one of these expensive engineering squares, going back to basics, please. Well, see, I mentioned knocking them over. I suppose I could make a little holder for it, and someday when I remember to and I'm over by the lathe, I probably will, but somehow in 40 years I haven't remembered to do it. Okay, as I was talking about these, how do I know these are actually 90 degrees? You'll need a piece of wood and see how straight it is, and this is pretty straight all the way across this edge. So what I'm going to do, make a little mark here and a little mark here. Then what I do is I flip it over . Well, can't find the mark I left here. Try this again. Wow, that's not easy to see. I'm going to get that black stuff over everything anyway, so why not start now? Okay, now I can flip it over and check it. And I'm maybe twice the thickness of this blade off. That's in, what, 6 inches? I'm a little less than a 1/16. That's really, for woodworking, that's really not so bad. Probably, well, actually, this is less than a 32nd. You can do the same thing with any of your squares. Oh, and if you do want to try to sharpen it, what you do is you come in on whichever side is you want, when you take a punch and you put a little dent here or a little dent here, and it pulls it in that direction. This one's close enough, I don't need to do that. Alrighty, so we have this, and if I run this down the side, ignoring where, oh, this has a very small amount. You can see this dark brown, hopefully in the camera. This actually is bark, and for about 3/8 of an inch is sapwood. That, of course, will go away. To give you a rough idea, that would be in this range. This is kind of thin, so it'll be here in the middle, so I will thankfully miss all this sapwood. There is one I made that had a bark inclusion, and oddly enough, there was a wormhole in the middle of it. And the wormhole was about right here. That was a rude surprise. Managed to get around it though. So you never know what Mother Nature is going to hand you. Alright, so this is fairly good. This is not nice, but again, I think I'll be far enough to the inside I won't have to worry about it. Okay, the way this piece of block goes, I need to take a very small amount along this edge, and then I'm going to run a plane over this just to kind of smooth it out so it's not so rough. Now, the top and the bottom here are at different angles, and now it's time to switch vices. I think I mentioned a carver's vise, and I'll be pretty much using it from now on. Got it moved. I got a chunk of wood underneath to help support it. Well, there we go. And I want to take just a little bit off of here and just make this a little smoother. Pretty much got a square now, as you can see. Yeah, I pretty much got it. So now I have a top and this side that is square that I can use for references. And yes, you too will start having the mark of a gunsmith or stockmaker. Now for laying this thing out. I think first I'm going to sand off the top so I can get rid of these black marks and I can see what I'm doing. Well, actually plane it off because it'll be a whole lot faster. And if your planes are sharp, then the top here will be just as smooth as if you sanded it. Just a couple of very quick swipes with the plane and got 90-something% of those black marks off. Now, need to plan out just what we're going to do. I'm going to use a very standard Remington 700 and a 243. This is the one that originally, this is a factory stock that this came in. And we can kind of make some adjustments in here, just what we want to do. We'll go over the grain and a few things like that, but let's stop for a moment and plan what we're going to do. Okay, when we actually start doing work on it, we're going to strip the receiver. Take the trigger off and remove the bolt. Now we have two screw holes, one here and one here, that go between the receiver and the trigger guard. And that's how we're going to do all of our alignment. There's also this lug in here, and that I'm actually going to leave. It gets to be a bit of a pain, but I tend to want to bed my receivers, and I also I start off with the barrel itself fully bedded. About 79.9% of the barrels like a little bit of upward pressure as far out here on the fore-end tip as you can get. This makes the barrel rigid. Now you're saying, well, you want to float a barrel. Yes, if it's just very temperamental during the seasons, it'll sit here and bump it and causes a little bit of buzz. Yes, that'll throw your groups all over the map. Well, this is how you get around it. And what it does is it makes this barrel act as if it's, this big around, which is just means it's going to be a little more accurate. Now I will also end up pillar bedding this down the road, but in the beginning we're going to sink it straight into the woods old school. So now how are we going to set all this up? I know I'm not going to put it in the middle. That's the way this is, and without cast off or toe out or toe in, any of that kind of stuff, it's going to be a little rough. So of course we want to accurize all this, so we're wanting to set this off to one side, and then the butt plate, of course, is going to be set as far as I can to this side. So first, let me go ahead and pull these parts off.